The hour was late. The skies above London burned. Men in the streets covered their children's ears as bombs fell like thunder from the heavens. And somewhere beneath that chaos, a single voice rose. Not in panic, not in weakness, but with the steel spine of a man who understood this simple truth. In every era, when civilization trembles, leadership either collapses or becomes immortal. Winston Churchill did not choose crisis. Crisis chose him. He did not wait for the world to calm. He stood in the fire and commanded it to listen. Because when empires crack and the air smells of fear, it is not titles or ranks that lead us. It is character. It is clarity. It is the man who will not flinch when others fold. The Second World War was not merely a conflict of nations. It was a test of willpower, a contest between tyranny and resolve. And in that contest, Churchill was not a participant. He was the resistance embodied. He spoke not just to inform, but to ignite, to make the weary rise, to turn doubt into defiance and rubble into resolve. But here's the truth few understand. Churchill did not win by strength. He won by strategy. He did not lead by being the loudest. He led by being the most unshakable. And if you are to lead through the storm in your own life, in business, in battle, in crisis, then you must know what he knew. That real leadership is not born in calm waters. It is forged in chaos, in the noise, in the silence, in the moment when your hands are trembling and your people are watching. Because when the world falls apart, the only man who can lead is the one who refuses to. Churchill's leadership began not in action, but in mindset. He understood that fear, left unchecked, spreads faster than fire. And in crisis, the first battle is not against the enemy, it's against the panic within. So he crafted his mind like a weapon. He fortified it with historical resolve. He read of Marlborough, of Napoleon, of Caesar. He studied not for knowledge, but for armor. He knew what so many forget, that if your mind fractures, your mission dies with it. He trained his thoughts not to flee from darkness, but to move through it. He believed in the indomitable force of will, and that belief became contagious. KBO, he would say, keep buggering on. It was not just a phrase. It was a battle cry in a suit and tie. He fought despair with discipline. He answered anxiety with action. He stared down chaos with calm and chose to believe that endurance would outlast destruction. And so must you, because if you lose your head, you lose your war. If you fold internally, you will never lead externally. Your first strategy in crisis leadership is this: fortify your inner citadel, bulletproof your mindset. Decide who you are before the test comes. So when it does, you don't flinch, you respond, not charisma. But belief without clarity is a blunt sword, and Churchill knew, to lead in crisis, you must wield your vision like a scalpel. Clarity, real clarity, is what makes men follow you into fire, not charisma, not confidence. Clarity. Churchill painted the future in vivid contrast. Victory, at all costs, we shall never surrender. This is our finest hour. He spoke not of outcomes, but of destiny. He made the people see what he saw, a nation bloodied but not broken, standing alone and still unafraid. His vision was not vague, it was ruthless in its direction. And that clarity shaped policy. It shaped morale. It shaped the very soul of a country drifting toward defeat. When others offered compromise, Churchill offered courage. When others sought negotiation, he declared resolve. Not because he was reckless, but because he understood something far more dangerous than bullets. A nation without direction will drown in its own doubt. So must you learn to see the horizon even when it's hidden in smoke. You do not lead in crisis by guessing. You lead by deciding. Not maybe, not someday, not let's wait and see. But this is where we go, and nothing will stop us. That kind of clarity creates gravity. It pulls people out of fear and into focus. It quiets the chaos, if only for a moment. And that moment can be enough to shift history. But clarity, no matter how brilliant, is only as powerful as the discipline that carries it forward. And Churchill was a disciple of discipline. He didn't sleep through his duty. He didn't delegate conviction. He lived the mission, hour by hour, minute by minute. Even as bombs shattered rooftops above him, he stood on balconies, cigar clenched, eyes to the sky, daring the enemy to see that he had not retreated. Not in body, not in spirit. Because discipline in crisis is not about perfection. It's about consistency when everything else is falling apart. He was methodical in his chaos, strategic in his fury. Every day, briefings. Every night, war maps spread before him. He tracked movement like a chess master playing at the edge of hell. He read, he wrote, he practiced speeches like incantations, sharpening every word into a blade that could pierce hopelessness itself. He knew that to lead through darkness, you must first command yourself. Your mornings must not be dictated by mood. Your actions must not be hostage to emotion. You must build systems within the storm, because routine is what roots you when the winds are wild. Discipline is not about obsession with control. It's about mastering the few things that matter, so the many things that don't can't break you. Churchill never pretended to be without flaw, but he never surrendered to it either. He embraced his habits. He trusted his rituals. He built inner order so that outer chaos would never consume him. And here lies one of the rarest truths of crisis leadership. The most dangerous man in a storm is the one whose feet are grounded in daily mastery. You do not survive fire by improvisation. You survive it by preparation, and then by motion. Because even the most disciplined plan means nothing if it's not followed by bold, relentless action. Churchill didn't wait for the perfect strategy. He didn't paralyze himself with the fear of being wrong. He moved. He sent ships. He evacuated Dunkirk. He gave the order, not with hesitation, but with the full weight of history behind him. He knew that hesitation in crisis is a silent killer, that waiting to be ready is how nations fall, that perfect is the enemy of possible. And so he acted, even when the odds looked suicidal, even when advisors begged him to pause, even when the critics sharpened their knives behind velvet doors. Because Churchill didn't need consensus, he needed progress. And progress requires movement. It demands the courage to be wrong sometimes, in pursuit of something that can't wait. You want to lead through crisis? Then stop waiting for permission. Stop waiting for applause. Stop waiting for the guarantee. A leader moves when others freeze. A leader speaks when others whisper. A leader steps forward not because it's safe, but because it's right. And every inch of movement you make, every call, every order, every plan is a blow against the paralysis that turns men into victims of their own fear. Churchill's strategy was not just military, it was psychological. He made movement a message. When he walked the streets during bombings, when he entered war rooms without sleep, when he broadcast radio messages in the dead of night, he told the world in every breath, "We will not stop, we will not hide, we will not yield." And that repetition, that movement, became rhythm, became momentum, became power. So ask yourself, right now, what are you delaying? What decisions are you postponing? What crisis are you watching, hoping it solves itself? It won't. You must act, and act again, and act again, until you carve through the storm like a blade through fog. Because that is what Churchill did, and that is what leaders do. They move, while the rest of the world waits. But action alone is not enough, because every action in crisis invites consequence. Mistakes, misjudgments, misunderstandings. Even Churchill, great as he was, made decisions that sparked outrage. He was second-guessed, misquoted, resisted at home and abroad. And yet he adapted, not by surrendering his vision, but by refining his methods. He evolved without ever compromising who he was. Because the core of crisis leadership is not stubbornness, it's adaptability without the loss of identity. Churchill listened, not to be popular, but to be effective. He studied the battlefield. He shifted alliances. He adjusted timelines, recalibrated strategies, recalculated risks, because he understood that rigid men break. But men who bend with purpose, they endure. Leadership is not about being unshakable in your ego. It's about being unshakable in your mission. If the bridge collapses, you don't argue about the blueprint. You find another way across. The wise leader doesn't take pride in sticking to the first idea. They take pride in getting to the right result, no matter how the road twists. And in a world that changes by the minute, in a battlefield filled with smoke and deception, only the adaptable survive. Churchill did not resist change. He wielded it. He used new technology. He allied with old enemies. He backed innovations that others mocked. Because to lead in crisis is to see what others cannot see and adjust before they even realize it's necessary. Adaptation is not weakness. It is intelligence in motion. It is humility with a spine, and it is essential. Because if you fail to adapt in a storm, you do not just fall behind, you become irrelevant. And irrelevance is the slow death of every leader who once had fire but forgot how to evolve. But for all his brilliance, Churchill was not a machine. He bled. He broke. He knew despair like a close companion. He suffered depression, his black dog, as he called it. He buried friends. He watched allies fall and cities burn, and in those moments there was no glory, no spotlight, just the quiet ache of responsibility. And yet he endured. He endured because resilience was not optional. It was vital. You see, crisis doesn't just test your strategy, it tests your soul. When the phone doesn't stop ringing, when the press distorts your every move, when failure starts to feel like a shadow you can't outrun, it's not skill that saves you, it's stamina. Resilience is the grit to keep going after everyone else has tapped out. It's the refusal to be defined by the losses. It's walking back into the fight after being knocked to the floor a dozen times. Churchill never let defeat write his ending. Not when he was fired from office. Not when the war dragged on. Not when people questioned if he had lost his edge. He showed up anyway. He kept writing, kept speaking, kept making decisions that would echo for generations. Because the war inside him was louder than the war around him. And still, he did not break. That's what real leaders do. They don't pretend to be immune to pain. They just refuse to be owned by it. They wear their scars like medals, not to boast, but to prove they're still standing. And if you're in the middle of your own war, whatever form it takes, know this: you are not too far gone. You are not too late. You are not too broken to rise. So rise. Even if your hands shake, even if your voice cracks, even if no one claps when you do. Because leadership in crisis isn't always visible. Sometimes it's just breathing deep, standing tall, and saying, "I'm not done yet." And when resilience becomes your rhythm, when discipline becomes instinct, when movement becomes mission, there is still one final ingredient that separates the great from the immortal: gratitude. Yes, gratitude. Not the soft kind that waits for blessings to arrive, not the polite nod we give when life is easy, but the unyielding appreciation for the opportunity to fight. Churchill was not grateful after the war. He was grateful in it, grateful for the chance to serve, grateful for the weight on his shoulders, grateful to wake up every morning with a nation depending on his voice. Because gratitude, in the fire, changes everything. It turns obligation into honor. It turns burden into calling. It turns crisis into the proving ground of the soul. Churchill gave thanks not just for peace, but for purpose. He believed that life was not supposed to be easy. It was supposed to be meaningful. And meaning is not found in comfort. It is forged in the crucible of duty. If you cannot be grateful for the storm, you will never rise above it. Because without gratitude, you become bitter. You look at your trials and say, "Why me?" But with gratitude, you look at them and say, "Try me." Gratitude is not a weakness. It's the ultimate flex of power, because it means you have decided that nothing can shake your identity, not even suffering. Churchill faced betrayal. He was abandoned by his party, he was dismissed by his people, and still he never grew cynical, because his heart remained anchored in something bigger than approval. He was not here to be worshipped. He was here to serve. And if you are called to lead, to truly lead, then gratitude must be your foundation. Not gratitude for results. Gratitude for the responsibility to rise, to guide, to bleed for something that matters. That's where real leadership begins. Not in talent, not in vision, but in service. Service to something greater than your ego. Service to a people who may never say thank you. Service to a future that may never know your name. Churchill didn't fight for fame, he fought for freedom. And in doing so, he became unforgettable. Not because he sought power, but because he used power for the powerless. You can fake charisma, you can even fake confidence, but you cannot fake service. It is the one thing that shines through in the dark. It is the light at the center of every great leader's legacy. And that light, when fueled by gratitude, becomes unstoppable. So if the walls are shaking around you, if the weight on your back is heavier than you ever imagined, if you feel like quitting would be easier than taking one more step, good. It means you're alive. It means you're exactly where every great leader has stood. It means you are standing on sacred ground, the ground of those who chose duty over escape. It means you're finally ready to lead. Not from a podium, not from a trending post, but from your soul. From the place inside you that doesn't care about applause, that doesn't need likes or titles or comfort, but simply burns with this single, ancient, unshakable truth. I was made for this moment. You think Churchill didn't feel fear? He did, but he walked into it, because the mission mattered more. You think he didn't want rest? He did, but the people mattered more. You think he didn't consider quitting? He did. And then he remembered that history only honors those who finish the fight. So he kept going. He kept leading. He kept lighting the path, even when he was exhausted, isolated, hated, and doubted, because that's what crisis leaders do. They walk into fire and somehow become the flame. And when the dust of war finally settled, when the skies cleared and silence returned to streets once shattered by bombs, there stood one man, weary, scarred, unshaken, who had led not just with strategy, but with soul. Churchill did not end the war with celebration. He ended it with humility, because he understood what so many forget. Leadership is not glory, it is sacrifice. It is carrying the weight of decisions no one else is willing to make. It is being the first to speak, the last to rest, and the one who absorbs the silence when there's no applause. It is knowing that history may never be fair, but it will always be honest. And if you gave your all, if you stood firm in the fire, history will remember that you did not flinch. This is what Churchill gave us. Not perfection, but presence. Not omnipotence, but relentless will. He showed us that leadership is not about being the smartest in the room. It's about being the bravest. That courage is not loud, it is quiet, it is steady. It is the choice to keep walking when your legs are trembling, to keep believing when the numbers say it's over, to keep building, even if the world burns around you. Crisis does not destroy leaders, it reveals them. It strips away the comfort, the illusions, the noise, and leaves only the raw truth. Are you still standing? Because at the end of every war, in business, in life, in the private battlefield of your soul, the only question that matters is this: did you stand your ground, or did you run? Did you whisper your way through life, or did you thunder? Did you compromise when it got hard, or did you fight like hell for what you knew was right? Churchill stood, not as a perfect man, but as a man who chose conviction over convenience, duty over doubt, legacy over self. And now the fire is passed to you, you who are staring down your own storm, you who carry the weight of choices that no one else sees, you who wake up with the pressure of leadership burning behind your eyes, you who feel the world asking you for more than you think you can give. This is your moment to channel the strategy of a man who refused to break, to summon the discipline, the clarity, the resilience, and the fire, to walk through your war, not just to survive, but to lead others through it. You don't need a cigar or a war cabinet. You don't need parliament or medals or parades. You only need one thing: the decision to rise, to endure, to lead like Churchill. Because leadership is not something you are born into. It is something you forge in the furnace. And if you stand firm, if you breathe through the chaos, if you keep moving forward when logic says turn back, then you will not only survive this crisis, you will become the storm that leads others through it. This is your war. This is your proving ground. This is your finest hour. So rise, lead, and never ever forget, the world follows the one who refuses to fall.